So, I want you to imagine walking into like a really high-end medical aesthetics clinic.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right. You check in at this pristine marble lobby. The staff offers you sparkling water, and, you're quietly ushered into a private, beautifully lit changing room.
Sounds very luxurious.
Exactly. And you look up at the ceiling and you notice a standard, boring smoke detector. You don't think twice about it.
Yeah, of course not. Why would you?
Exactly. But what if that smoke detector wasn't actually looking for smoke? What if it was a high-definition hidden camera just recording your most vulnerable moments while you undressed?
Wow. I mean, that is just a profoundly unsettling image.
Right.
It completely violates the fundamental expectation of safety and, absolute privacy that you assume the second you cross the threshold of a medical environment.
And the really terrifying part is that this isn't some hypothetical scenario from a movie. This is the exact nightmare currently exploding around愛爾麗, which is a massive medical aesthetics giant in Taiwan.
It really is massive.
Yeah. Just to give you a sense of the scale we're dealing with, we are talking about a corporate juggernaut pulling in annual revenues estimated at up to 8 billion NTD.
That is a staggering amount of money.
It is. And right now, they're facing this absolute existential collapse because these hidden cameras, disguised as smoke detectors, were discovered not just in one rogue location, but systematically installed across 18 of their different clinics.
18 clinics? I mean, the scale of that breach is just, it's hard to wrap your head around.
Totally.
We are looking at a corporate crisis of epic proportions here. And that immense scale is exactly why we're analyzing this today.
Right, because we're taking a specific angle on this.
Exactly. We're going to look closely at the facts of the scandal, obviously, but we are going to do so through a very specific analytical lens. Our mission for today's deep dives is to use this very real, incredibly high-stakes corporate meltdown as, basically a masterclass in business English and corporate strategy.
And I think that's the perfect angle for this. Because when you strip away the shocking headlines for a moment, as hard as that is, what you're left with is basically a textbook blueprint of how a massive business empire is built.
Yes, specifically a hyper-aggressive, high-cash flow business model.
Right. And on the flip side, you get this real-time view into how a corporation scrambles to survive when its foundational asset suddenly turns into a massive liability.
It's a fascinating pivot to watch.
It really is. So by unpacking this case, you, our listener, are going to walk away with some incredibly powerful vocabulary and some deep insights into high-level corporate crisis management.
That is the goal.
Yeah.
But to properly dissect a business case of this magnitude, we really need the right analytical tools.
Okay, lay on us.
Let's establish our foundational vocabulary first. I want to highlight a few core strategic concepts that dictate, pretty much everything this company did, both in its rise and in its current crisis. And I'm actually going to slow my speaking pace down just a little bit here, just to make sure the pronunciation of these core terms is crystal clear for you.
Love it. Let's get into it. What's the first foundational concept we need to understand the愛爾麗empire?
Right. So the entire financial architecture of this company is built around one core concept: high profit margin. I'll say that again. High profit margin.
High profit margin. Got it.
Whenever you are analyzing an industry like aesthetics, you have to look at the high profit margin. In corporate finance, a profit margin is a ratio. It's a company's profit divided by its revenue.
Okay, making sense so far.
So when we talk about a high profit margin, we're describing a business where the revenue generated from sales vastly exceeds the actual operational costs of providing that specific product or service.
Oh, I see. So it's like instead of the old cliche of buying a coffee bean for a penny and selling the cup for $5, a better analogy might be the software industry.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Yeah, because it costs millions to develop a piece of software, but the cost to sell one additional license to a new customer is basically zero. The markup on that marginal sale is astronomical.
That is a highly accurate comparison. And in a corporate environment, you have to constantly prioritize these areas.
How would you use that in a meeting?
Well, for instance, in a strategy meeting, you might say, to accelerate our growth, we need to aggressively shift our focus toward product lines with a high profit margin.
Okay, so the margins on these beauty treatments are just massive. But massive margins on single treatments don't automatically build an 8 billion NTD empire overnight, right?
No, they don't.
Right. There has to be some mechanism to capture all that value at scale.
And that mechanism is our second core concept for today, the prepaid membership model. Again, that is the prepaid membership model.
Prepaid membership model.
Exactly. This defines a financial structure where customers are incentivized to pay a large lump sum of money up front in exchange for a bundle of future services or goods that they'll, consume gradually over a long period.
Wait, this is essentially unregulated shadow banking.
It really is.
Right, like the clinic isn't just selling a service, they're operating like a bank that takes massive deposits. It's like a gym membership where you get locked in for a year.
Yes, that's exactly the dynamic.
The customer gives them all the capital today, but the clinic might not actually incur the cost of delivering those services for another year or two.
You've hit on the exact financial leverage at play here. It provides the corporation with immediate, massive cash liquidity before they have even fulfilled their service obligations.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So if you were pitching this pivot in a boardroom, you would argue transitioning our core services to a prepaid membership model will significantly improve our upfront cash flow.
It sounds like an absolute dream for cash flow, honestly, assuming nothing interrupts the service delivery.
And that is the big caveat, yes.
But obviously, in this case, something catastrophic did interrupt it, which requires a completely different strategic response.
Yes, it does. When that model fractures, a company must immediately pivot to our third concept, damage control. Once more, damage control.
Damage control.
In a corporate context, damage control refers to the coordinated strategic measures taken by a leadership team to offset, minimize, or contain harm to a company's reputation or finances following a major public failure.
So it's basically the corporate triage unit.
Exactly.
It's what you do to stop the bleeding when you realize you have a severed artery.
Precisely. It is all about containment. So a very common workplace application of this phrase would be the PR team is working overtime on damage control after the product recall.
Okay, so we have our strategic framework: high profit margin, the prepaid membership model, and damage control.
We do.
Now let's map these concepts directly onto the愛爾麗case. Looking through the sources, one of the most surprising details to me is the origin story.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Yeah, the founder of this massive medical empire, Chang Rushan, he didn't start out as a doctor or a dermatologist. He started his career as a grassroots salesman hawking water purifiers and perfumes.
And that non-medical background is really the skeleton key to understanding his entire strategy.
Really? How so?
Well, he viewed the medical aesthetics industry not through the lens of a healthcare provider, but purely through the lens of a sales professional seeking maximum leverage. From his days selling cosmetics, he identified what business analysts often refer to as the three highs of the female beauty market.
The three highs. Okay, what are those specific traits?
First, the high profit margins we just discussed. The raw cost of the injectable serums, the depreciation of the laser machines, the technician's hourly rate, all of that is vastly outweighed by the premium pricing clients are willing to pay.
Right, the markup is huge.
Exactly. Second, he saw a high repurchase rate. These treatments are rarely permanent. They require constant cyclical maintenance.
That makes sense. And the third?
The third is high customer stickiness.
Okay, wait, let me guess. Stickiness in this context isn't just about, like, a good loyalty program with a punch card.
Not at all.
It's about the incredibly high psychological switching cost. I mean, if a client finds a practitioner who successfully alters their face or body without messing it up, the psychological barrier to leaving that clinic and trusting a total stranger with their appearance is massive.
It is a huge barrier, yes.
They are essentially locked in by bodily trust.
That is an excellent deduction. That physical trust creates a deeply entrenched customer base. But recognizing those three highs is really only step one.
Right.
The critical question is how you weaponize those traits to scale a business into the billions.
And that leads us straight back to the unregulated banking concept we talked about earlier, the prepaid membership model.
Exactly.
Because if a client pays for a single laser treatment, the clinic just secures a steady, predictable trickle of income. But the sources show愛爾麗heavily incentivized something radically different.
They really pushed the boundaries.
Yeah, they offered steep, aggressive discounts. We're talking sometimes 40 to 60% off the standard sticker price if the client committed to buying a package of 5 or 10 sessions up front.
Let's break down the psychology and the math of that transaction because it's brilliant. For the consumer, if a premium treatment is priced at $10,000, but you can secure it for $5,000 by purchasing a bulk package.
It triggers a psychological win.
Exactly. The consumer feels they are gaming the system and securing immense value. But look at the corporate side of the ledger.
Right. On the corporate side, they are sacrificing some of their future margin to secure a massive influx of present-day liquidity.
Yes.
Instead of collecting $10,000 today and hoping the client comes back next month, they collect $50,000 immediately.
And then you multiply that transaction by thousands of loyal clients, and you suddenly have a mountain of capital sitting in your corporate accounts for services you haven't even rendered yet.
That's wild.
They've effectively crowdsourced a massive zero-interest loan from their own customer base.
Wow. And that zero-interest capital is the engine for growth.
It is. Now, the strategic genius of this operation, and I am speaking strictly from an aggressive wealth-building perspective here, lies in how the founder deployed that mountain of prepaid cash.
Okay.
In retail or brick-and-mortar services, your single greatest vulnerability is almost always your commercial landlord.
Wait, let me piece this together. If you run a highly successful, high-traffic clinic, your landlord is eventually going to notice your success, right?
He will notice.
So when your commercial lease is up for renewal, the landlord is inevitably going to hike the rent. They essentially use your geographic dependence against you to siphon off your profit margins.
You have identified the exact structural flaw of retail expansion. So how did the founder neutralize that landlord threat?
Did he buy the buildings?
He did. He used the zero-interest loans generated by the prepaid membership model to outright purchase the commercial real estate where his clinics operated.
Oh, wow.
The source material highlights a staggering example. He purchased a specific storefront in Kaohsiung for 4.5 million NTD. Today, the market value of that exact same property has exploded to 60 million NTD.
That is a masterstroke of capital allocation. So they aren't really an aesthetics company. They are a commercial real estate acquisition vehicle funded by unregulated consumer loans.
That is a very accurate way to frame it.
The medical aesthetics side generated the cash flow, which funded the real estate purchases. Then the real estate appreciation drastically inflated the overall net worth of the corporate empire while simultaneously locking in their operational costs and protecting their high profit margins.
Yes.
It's like a closed-loop, dual-engine growth strategy.
It's brilliant on paper, and it built an 8 billion NTD fortress. However, and this is a massive... However, this entire dual-engine structure rests on a single, incredibly fragile linchpin.
The trust of the consumer.
Exactly. The continuous, uninterrupted trust of the consumer walking through the front door. When that trust evaporates, the entire financial architecture collapses inward.
Which brings the entire empire crashing into the present day. Hidden cameras are discovered inside standard smoke detectors across 18 separate clinics.
Just horrifying.
Yeah. And these are environments where clients are partially or entirely undressed for intimate body contouring and aesthetic procedures. The violation of bodily trust is absolute.
And the fallout is instantaneous. Over 2,000 members have organized into a self-help group demanding immediate refunds for their prepaid packages.
Oh, right.
That mountain of prepaid capital we discussed, in a matter of days, it transformed from a strategic asset into a massive, immediate financial liability. The zero-interest loan has basically been called in all at once.
It's the equivalent of a devastating bank run. If everyone demands their deposit simultaneously, the institution faces catastrophic insolvency.
Which necessitates the immediate deployment of our third core concept, damage control. What is fascinating for us to analyze is how the corporation is executing a highly complex two-pronged strategy here. There's the public-facing PR strategy, and then there's the hidden, aggressive legal strategy occurring behind closed doors.
Let's examine the public maneuver first.
Okay.
According to the sources, the company's immediate public response was to announce the creation of a 100 million NTD member guarantee trust fund.
Yes.
And they issued these statements declaring this fund was established explicitly to protect consumer rights and signal absolute financial stability to the market.
Right. And from a corporate strategy standpoint, this is a textbook stabilizing maneuver. To stop a bank run, you must project overwhelming liquidity.
Make them think you have the money.
Exactly. By visibly parking 100 million NTD in a trust, they are broadcasting a clear message. We are highly capitalized, your investments are secure, and there is no need for a panic withdrawal. It's designed to reassure the market and stabilize the remaining customer base.
Okay, hold on. I have a major problem with framing that as just a standard stabilizing maneuver.
Fair enough. Why is that?
Well, that makes it sound like a responsible governance decision. But if you look at the other prong of their strategy, what is actually happening behind closed doors when a client requests their money, it paints a very different picture.
That is very true.
The sources report that consumers are being stonewalled. To actually get a refund from the supposed massive pool of liquidity, the clinics are forcing them to sign a highly restrictive waiver of rights document.
The specifics of that document are indeed critical. The waiver reportedly mandates that in exchange for receiving their unspent prepaid funds, the customer must formally agree to abandon all future civil and criminal claims against the corporation related to the hidden camera breach.
So that trust fund isn't a reassuring safety net for the consumer at all. It is a massive war chest being used to extort silence.
That is the argument many are making, yes.
They are holding the customer's own money hostage to purchase legal immunity. We will give you your money back, but only if you sign away your right to sue us for filming you. That fundamentally contradicts their public narrative of consumer protection.
Your analysis highlights the stark discrepancy between their public relations and their legal reality. Now, impartially speaking, the company's official stance maintains that these waivers are standard operating procedures meant to protect the clinics against routine medical malpractice disputes.
Routine disputes.
That's their claim, that it's not a tool to silence victims of a privacy breach. However, investigators are also observing another aggressive financial maneuver known as shell shedding.
Shell shedding. Okay, what does that mechanical process look like for a corporation of this size?
It involves rapidly restructuring the legal architecture of the business. The sources indicate the founder is actively changing the corporate representatives and legal directors of at least 5 of his affiliated companies.
Why do that?
Well, in corporate law, if a company faces a massive class action lawsuit, the plaintiffs will attempt to pierce the corporate veil to seize the underlying assets.
Oh, like that highly valuable real estate portfolio we discussed. I see. So by rapidly shuffling the legal representatives and severing the direct operational ties between the toxic clinics and the pristine real estate holding companies, he is building a legal labyrinth.
That's a great way to visualize it.
He's trying to firewall the core assets so that when the lawsuits inevitably hit, the plaintiffs just find an empty shell company with no assets to seize.
That is the intended utility of shell shedding. It is a highly aggressive form of financial damage control designed to insulate the founder's wealth from the cascading liabilities of the clinics.
Wow.
However, legal experts analyzing this strategy have pointed out a massive, potentially fatal flaw in this entire defensive perimeter, specifically regarding those waivers.
Let me guess, a standard business waiver doesn't actually cover covertly filming people getting undressed.
It goes much deeper than standard liability. The investigators reportedly discovered underage imagery on the confiscated hard drives retrieved from these hidden cameras.
Oh, God.
Yes. And under the law, offenses involving the exploitation of minors are not classified as private civil disputes between a business and a consumer. They are classified as public prosecution crimes.
Meaning they are crimes against the state itself.
Correct. And a signed waiver from a private citizen cannot legally prevent a state prosecutor from pursuing public prosecution crimes. Those waivers are legally void regarding the most severe allegation.
Oh, wow. So they mean nothing.
Right. Therefore, legal analysts suggest that this entire apparatus, the public trust fund, the coerced waivers, the frantic shell shedding, is ultimately a desperate stopgap measure. It is designed to halt the immediate bleeding of cash and slow down the legal process, but it likely cannot shield the corporation from the ultimate legal reckoning.
This is just a phenomenal breakdown of corporate vulnerability. Let's synthesize everything we've extracted from this case today.
Let's do it.
We have analyzed the architecture of a massive business empire built on the incredibly lucrative yet highly volatile foundation of prepaid cash flow. We saw how they brilliantly funneled that zero-interest capital into a commercial real estate fortress to permanently protect their high profit margins.
Very solid summary.
But ultimately, because of a catastrophic operational and ethical failure, the systematic installation of hidden cameras, that entire leverage structure is collapsing, forcing the leadership into a chaotic, multi-pronged strategy of legal and public damage control.
It really serves as a stark reminder of how rapidly a high cash flow model can transform into a high liability nightmare when the underlying foundational trust is compromised.
Absolutely.
Now, as promised, the goal of this deep dive is to equip you with practical tools. I want you to take these concepts directly into your own professional environment.
Yes, time for the takeaway.
Here's a phrase you can use in your next meeting when discussing risk management or crisis strategy. We need to implement strict damage control to protect our profit margins before this crisis escalates. Say that one more time. We need to implement strict damage control to protect our profit margins before this crisis escalates.
I highly encourage you to practice integrating that phrase into your business vocabulary. And beyond just the vocabulary, I want you to think about the underlying mechanics we discussed today.
Yes, apply it to your world.
Exactly. Look closely at your own industry. Are there hidden liabilities masked within your company's revenue streams? Are you overly reliant on prepaid models that could suddenly reverse if market trust shifts?
Those are the exact strategic questions you should be asking. And as we conclude today's analysis, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to ponder regarding the absolute limits of corporate strategy.
Let's hear it.
We spent this entire session detailing how this prepaid business model relies entirely on the psychological and bodily trust of the consumer. If a company's entire financial engine is fueled by that intimate trust, can any amount of clever financial restructuring, legal shell shedding, or aggressive PR damage control truly save the business once that fundamental trust is unequivocally shattered? I mean, no matter how much money is in the trust fund, can the consumer ever unsee the camera hidden in the smoke detector?
That is the ultimate question for this empire, and frankly, I don't think any amount of capital can buy that trust back.
It's hard to imagine they could.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of a corporate collapse. Keep analyzing the structures around you, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.
喜欢这种学习方式，欢迎订阅我的频道，让我们一起用下一个10分钟，把商业英文变简单。